just don't like music.
Well, that's hurtful.
He's like, what's the point of your paper? He said, I guess he feels like that a lot, and I think a lot of people write about Elvis, and you know, it's pretty typical. And,
Yeah, that's boring.
Yeah, it's like everyone knows about Elvis. Like,
I
no matter
know.
where you're
Go
at.
to Graceland, you'll know about Elvis.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to tell you how music education developed, especially in the elementary level in Memphis.
Okay.
Because it really affected everything else. I mean, other music education. So in like around 1966, 67, the Memphis Symphony Orchestra figured they saw that like middle schools and high schools had really small string programs, and they wanted to increase them. And they determined that if they could, put some money into it, they could strengthen the especially middle school string programs. And at the time, Lyndon Johnson was president, and he had just passed a whole bunch of legislation entitled the War on Poverty. And this was like the Civil Rights Act, and there was a lot of education funding that went with it. And one of the funds was specifically for arts education. So the Memphis Symphony Orchestra actually paid, I want to say it was about $2,000, which is a lot of money back then. Not that it's not today, but you know what I mean. To the Memphis City Schools Board of Education to hire somebody to write a grant to get some of the money from the Johnson legislation. And so they hired a music teacher who was actually, she was trained as a music teacher, but she didn't have a job, so that worked out. And she was a wife of a professor here, and she quickly realized she was kind of in over her head. So they hired somebody to help her, and it was another unemployed music teacher. And together they wrote a grant that would find an innovative way, or the latest, greatest innovative steps in music education. And they, excuse me, they determined that really, if you wanted to build up the middle school and high school strings program, the instruction needed to start at the elementary level. So they found these innovative approaches that were being used at the time, and one of them was called Orff-Schulwerk.
Could you spell that for me?
ORFF. And then hyphen Schulwerk. It's German for schoolwork. It's SCHULWERK. And so they wrote this grant, and they got it. And at the time, it was the largest grant ever awarded in the United States for for teacher education, arts education, and it was a Title III grant. And it's funny to think of it now because it was only $130,000, which again is, I mean, that's a lot of money, but it's nothing today.
You said 130,000? Sorry, how much did you say?
$130,000.
Okay.
130,000. I had to think about it for a moment because I'm a little punchy because I'm tired.
Yeah.
So, so this money paid for training and instruments in the that were going to be used in the classrooms. And at the time, there were very few music teachers, like literally out of about 60 schools, 60 elementary schools, I think there was one music teacher.
Oh, wow.
And the only reason they had her is it was privately funded. Somebody paid her salary. Somebody with deep pockets paid her salary. So they started, interviewing people who had music backgrounds but were teachers, and those are the ones they hired. And they started with, oh Lord, 1, 2, 3. I want to say 10. They started with. Oh, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, hang on. Oh, yeah. They started with 9 schools. And the other element was they had to collaborate. It couldn't be just schools. It had to be a collaboration between public schools, private schools, and an arts entity.
Public schools, private schools, art entity.
Yeah, and the so the public schools, I mean, it was Memphis City Schools, and it was 9 schools at first. I think it was 6 public schools, 3 private schools, and then the arts entity was the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. And so they chose their music teachers, and they started, before the school year started, they had like a 1-week training, and it was here at University of Memphis, although back then it was Memphis State University. And so they had these workshops that took place like the week before to kind of train these teachers, and then they sent them out into the schools to at the elementary level to start teaching using the Orff-Schulwerk approach. And let me tell you a little bit about that. So that is, they don't like to call it a methodology, but it's basically an approach to teaching music, or a methodology of teaching music based on what children do naturally, which is sing, speak, dance, or move, and play instruments and drum on stuff. I mean, you've probably seen little kids yeah. And so part of this involved getting instruments, and have you ever seen those? I wish I had some in here, but I don't think I do. Small xylophones and glockenspiels, like they have them in elementary schools a lot of times.
Oh yeah, like the colorful ones for little kids, or do you mean like real ones?
They're real ones, but they're small. I'm looking around to see if they have any pictures.
Oh, they're like they fit on a table?
Yes.
Usually they're on a table. I think I've seen those.
Yeah. Okay. So that's those are the types of instruments people use in Orffschulwerk.
Okay.
And so the grant paid for not only training, but paid for the schools to have those instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And because there were so many schools but so few music teachers, they would send the music teachers, like, they might be in one school for one semester and then a different school. And because at the time the schools were very segregated, because even though Brown versus the Board of Education, which was the legislation that, you know, said that separate but equal is not equal, and they were ordered to desegregate the schools, Memphis took its time because of just the racial dynamics in the city.
Yeah.
So what was really interesting is they started sending, and I don't know, I really need to talk to her again, but they started sending white teachers to primarily black schools and black teachers to primarily white schools, the music teachers. So they started collaborating together, and because of that, they, in addition to, you know, some of the poorer schools, which just happened to be the black schools, getting these great instruments, they also started to realize that if they used the music that the children were used to or that the children were most familiar with, it would be more relevant to them. So they would integrate, like, you know, spirituals and gospel music and jazz into the curriculum, which made it more relevant to them.
Right. Makes sense.
And by the way, I'm recording this, and I'll do the little trick that I told you about, and I'll send you the notes so you can go, oh yeah, that's what she was talking about. So this continued to grow, and you know, it went from 9 schools to 15 schools, and then, I mean, they continuously added schools. Like the third year, they added 20. It went from 9 to 15. It was 9 schools, and then they added another 15, is what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't say that very clearly.
Okay.
And then the third year, they added another 27 schools. I know. So it was really growing.
Okay.
So what else can I tell you about this? So in the meantime, so they're adding all these schools, and so Monday through Thursday, this was an interesting kind of element of the program. Monday through Thursday, the teachers would go and teach music in their schools, but then on Fridays, they would all come together and meet as a group so they could, like, collaborate on their lesson plans and give each other ideas for the next week. So every week they would meet together, and they did this pretty consistently for the first 2 years. And then in the summer, they wanted more training, so they'd come back to what was then Memphis State, and they would have 2-week trainings in this approach to teaching this Orffschulwerk. And the 2 original women that wrote the grant, who were Connie Kuntz and Nancy Ferguson, they would teach the classes, but then they also brought in a guy from Belgium who would also teach. And because he was very well known, the program started to grow during the summer. So, like the first year, I think they only had like, I don't know, 15 people. But the second year, the second or the third year, in just one of the classes, they had 50 people, and they came from around the country. So it was greatly growing.
Yeah, that's pretty fast.
Yeah. And okay, so that program continued to grow. And just a side note, the program is still here. That's my job during the summer, is to run it. And I think some summers it's been well over 100 teachers a summer. And this past summer, in spite of the pandemic, I think we had around 70, which I thought was pretty good because of the pandemic. And then kind of another element that was going on, you know how I mentioned that Brown versus the Board of Education in Memphis was under a desegregation order?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, so they started to take steps to intentionally desegregate the schools. And this was in like the late 60s. Well, in the early 70s, because of those efforts, a lot of, well, there was white flight. Have you ever heard of that term?
No.
So white flight is when the white parents take their children out of the schools because the black population is increasing, or the black percentages are increasing in those schools.
Mm-hmm.
So they started opening up private schools all around Memphis. And a lot of these schools were just at people's houses, and they weren't necessarily legitimate schools.
Uh-huh.
And they're referred to as segregation academies. Let's see. So as the population of the schools changed, because what happened is the percentage of white students went down, the percentage of black students in the public schools went up, because a lot of the oh wow a lot of the white students were going to the private schools and the segregation academies. So the black population continued to climb. So the music teachers responded by further changing the music they were using in class and using music of the children's culture.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, more African American folk songs and spirituals and jazz. So they continued to, the program began to grow and eventually made its way into all the schools, in all the Memphis elementary schools, which now, there's like, how many is it? Let me look it up real quick. Sorry, I should have these stats for you just off the top of my head. Schools. Come on. Elementary schools. I want to say it's like in the 80s. I mean, there are a lot of elementary schools. Well, their website isn't working correctly. Okay, that's the total, 214 schools. Yes, but how many are elementaries? I want to say, I think it's 90, it's like 98 or something. So as the program grew, because these teachers were so highly trained, the school board supported them with funding, and they purchased instruments for all the schools. So it became a point of like equality and equity for all students, that all the students in the elementary classroom, the music classroom, had the same stuff. They had the same instruments and the same materials, whereas previously that was not the case. There was a lot of inequity, but this became an equity point, is what I'm trying to say. And so I'm looking for something. Oh, here it is. So as those teachers, I mentioned that they came together and they would work together on Fridays and collaborate. So they started to create arrangements of the children's songs, to be accompanied by those Orff instruments, and they created so many of those arrangements that they started publishing them. And one of the music professors here, Dr. Bennett, started a publishing company purely from those all those arrangements that people had made. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sort of. Compose Yourself, Wildflower. I was going to play you a little, because you don't really get what it is until you kind of hear it. But like all of these books that I have down here were published by, well, come on. I have to find one of the old publishing, because these are updated versions of it. That's the deal. Yeah, Memphis Music Craft was the name of the publishing house. And so they published these, just arrangements of songs and lessons for teachers to do, and they became super popular around the country. Trying to find an arrangement. Yeah, so this is an example of the kind of stuff they played. Oh, come on, play. So those are those little instruments, and this is probably 4th and 5th grade playing, and they're actually doing the playing. These are kids playing, yeah. Trying to get up to where they start singing. Isn't that cool? And then they start clapping and patting and stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that they would arrange for the kids to play. And you can so tell that they're Memphis kids because of rockabye soul in the way they're singing. I just love it. I played this at conferences like in where was I? I don't know, somewhere in the north. And they're like, whoa. I said, yeah, it's very Southern. And so they continued publishing these things and having the trainings during the summer. And we just celebrated our 50th anniversary of having both the Orff music in the schools and then the Orff music here at University of Memphis. And what else? I'm trying to kind of wrap it up so you can I know you have stuff to do, but so you can get some points out of it. But like I said, it became a huge point of equality in the public schools. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the whole impetus for it was to increase participation in the middle schools, and it did, because the kids got good music instruction at the elementary school level, so they were really engaged and they knew they could be successful at it. So then they would join ensembles and choir and orchestra and band when they got to middle school, so it helped those programs grow. And the publication of these books, I mean, this is just one of them, but there's like, oh my gosh, there must be 30 of them. They sold throughout the country, so that continued to like spread this style of teaching, specifically with children's culture in mind. I'm trying to find some of the old pictures. Oh, here they are. And it also brought literally thousands of teachers here over the years through to join us every summer in the teacher education course that takes place. And it's just, I mean, the fact that it still continues. And now, in fact, this just came up on my time hop. At the very beginning, they were collaborating with the Memphis Symphony Orchestra and the private school and the public schools. Now, Memphis Symphony Orchestra works with Memphis, well, it's now Shelby County Schools, but the schools around Memphis, they do this project called Side by Side, where they do arrangements of children's music, and the kids, the orchestra plays with the students in a performance. Let me show you a video. Like this is one of them. So that's the orchestra, obviously. And there's the kids over there playing along. They're a little bit apart, but you get the point. But it was this huge all-school program.
That's so nice.
And yeah, and pre-pandemic, we used to do this all the time.
That's cool.
Yeah, isn't that cool? Those are the little ones. But anyway, so, I mean, the collaboration still continues with Memphis Symphony Orchestra. The program has grown and spread to every school in every elementary school in Shelby County Schools. And then the summer program still continues to have, teachers come many from Shelby County Schools to do the, or what's now Shelby County, but it used to be Memphis City Schools. They changed the name 10 years ago, I want to say. And as I said, it helped invigorate the secondary schools music programs, because then the kids were like really pumped about, joining. But it's really a unique program that Memphis is lucky to have.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that might give you enough?
Are you able to email me like the links for the recordings, or?
Yeah, I think I could actually. Yeah, because that would be. Let me see if I can.
Like some evidence type mention.
Yeah.
Um,
I can also email you some of the pictures that were. Where were they? I think I've included it in the index. I mean, the two ladies that did this, one of them was just a brilliant. She's still alive. She's like 80 years old. She lives out in Bartlett. She was just brilliant. She had like a book published with all the the pictures of the kids playing and dancing and singing, and to help support it. That's one of the first music teachers that got involved in it. She literally I think she just passed away last year, I want to say. And she was a huge supporter. Like when I first came here, I went to one of the concerts, and this 80-year-old woman was there at that concert. She said, "Oh, I never miss any of them." And
Aww.
yeah, it was very cool.
So what's the name of that book? I might be able to so I can reference it.
Oh, this one is my dissertation.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll send you all that info. No,
Okay.
I'll send it to you because it will give a reference. Yeah, it's funny because they're all like dressed from the 60s, but I'll send you a link that you can pull some of these pictures. I don't know if he'd want that, but
I'd probably add like a few.
yeah, I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something unique we have. And it was all started by this legislation. A lot of people think, oh, government legislation isn't going to help us this much. But that's one that really, made a difference in the city. So
what do you think my argument statement is where
that, I thought of a couple of things that I think one of the big benefits of this program has been equity of materials throughout the school. I mean, throughout the schools, because the schools in Memphis used to be extremely, to be super honest, they are still segregated, but it's because of where people live. But they used to be all white or all black. And the black schools didn't have as much stuff, but this program made sure that every school, they all had the instruments, they all had trained music teachers that implemented this approach to teaching. So it became a point of equity for them. And when they started desegregating schools, they also desegregated faculties, because it used to be all black schools had all black teachers and all white schools had all white teachers, and the music teachers were the first to get shifted around.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, they were amongst the first to get, because I was talking to one of them and she said, yeah, they moved me to this other school and I was a little nervous at first, but it was fun and I learned all this great new music, and she was cool. She just passed away too.
So you knew like people who were actually involved in this? Or?
Yeah, I went and interviewed them for my
That is so
dissertation.
cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, yeah, when I got here, I hadn't finished my dissertation, or I hadn't even written it yet, and I was thinking of doing something completely different.
Uh-huh.
But my advisor, I started just kind of telling him about Orff here in Memphis, and he said, "That's what you need to write about. That's fascinating." And I went, "Okay." So that's what I did. Yeah, and then I got to interview, Connie. She's a hoot. She's a riot. Let me turn off the recorder.